And welcome to another edition of Murphy's Hockey Law. I'm your host, Jimmy Murphy, and proud to have on right now a friend of mine, and known him from way back in his days with the Bruins, and then sitting up in the press box, whether it was with Nesson or scouting or what have you. But now he is the general manager of the New Jersey Devils, Tom Fitzgerald. Fitz, how you doing?
Doing great, Murph. How are you?
Good, good. Just kind of wondering where the summer went. It was just a blur as they always Fitz, and I'm sure it's even shorter for people in your position. But did you have a good summer?
I did. I really did have a great summer. Looking back as the GM in the past summers, I think the original summer was the Seattle expansion draft, and everything was pushed back because of the season that was delayed. The COVID season, last season it was not only doing contracts right through the beginning of August. You add in arbitration. It was in Toronto for a complete week, and then you kind of relax a little bit. But this summer's been different. We got our business done pretty much prior to the draft. Some kind of cleaning up with some of our RFAs, and development camp came around the July 9th, and after that it was vacation time and just some odds and end things, some hockey office stuff. But for the most part, it's been a great summer.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like we're kind of, in terms of the NHL schedule, we're getting back to normal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember last year too, the draft was like, mid-July when we were in Montreal, right? So
yeah, I think it was like July 8th, something crazy,
Yeah, so that was, it was good. Man, you think back, Fitz, too, I still get the COVID season and that shortened one after. It's still like just all sort of lumped as one to me. I can't mentally separate it. It's strange. And you look back and you're trying to like do research for players, and I always go to the wrong year. But I mean, I'm sure it was like that for GMs as well.
Well, for me, you got to remember, I kind of was asked to be the interim GM in 2000, January 12th to be exact.
Right before COVID.
The season gets canceled.
Yep.
And we're one of the teams. Remember that, was it a 20-team playoff that year?
Mm-hmm.
Or what? Maybe it's more, 24. I think 24 teams. And we were one of the 7 that wasn't invited, and so that made for a longer off season, and then the season came back. Remember, in the summer.
Yep.
But you know what? I look at some of our young players, and I know we'll talk about them here, but that elongation of an off season really helped them pop and mature physically, because they had that extra bunch of months in the gym that you usually don't get in summer.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting. And I look at some of in terms of scouting too, Fitz, and I know, you're constantly in touch with your scouts, what that must have been like for those guys, right? Because you weren't able to go over to Europe for a bit. Everything was video and everything was just by phone, getting reports from people over there. How much more, not that you're not in touch with them all the time anyways, but how much more were you dependent on those European guys that were based in Europe?
Yeah, well, I think it was the whole staff, led by the guys that were leading at that time. And you're right. I mean, we had more. We probably had at least weekly calls to go through, because we had 3 picks. Remember, my first draft, we had 3 picks, whether we kept them or we traded something, but we ended up keeping them. So there's no guarantees, but we just wanted to make sure we really knew the players. So we would constantly watch video together, go through each player, kind of refine the list, what we were looking for, what we defined as a Devil, the characteristics that we wanted to see in our players. What warts could we live with, but if the warts were too big, then are these players able to hit their ceiling? And really, my mandate was, I want to look at guys with the highest ceiling, the guys that have star potential. And if it's a 20% or 18% or a 10% versus an 80%, well, this guy's going to play in your third line, 100% on your fourth line. We were looking for the guys who could be stars or have
Yeah.
the ability to be stars. So with that being said, it's tough. It's tough for these guys. But we did it as a group. We all had a voice because all we had was time.
Yeah.
And with that time, we used it to watch a lot of video.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's go back to that. And you're looking at some of these guys right now. Are there guys now on the roster that maybe made it sooner than you thought from that period of time?
Well, the first draft I had was Alexander Holt and Shakir Makamadulin. And Dawson came in. He was a later birthday, so
Okay.
he turned pro as a 19 turning 20-year-old. But you know what? He just popped right away in the rookie tournament, and
Yeah.
he kept his foot on the pedal and just kept it going. And not every player can do that. Doesn't mean every player can't hit their ceiling. But he in particular, just kind of pulled off I call it a Jesper Bratt, somebody who comes into camp and go, wow, you know what? We can't send him down. He's been impactful in training
Yep.
camp.
That's good. A good segue there too. I was reading a story by my colleague at New Jersey Hockey Now, James Nichols, talking about Jesper Bratt there, and really was impressed with what he said about. I'm sure you've seen the quotes where he said, "Look, I don't get this long-term contract if I didn't do the short ones first and prove myself." And he seemed. I said, "Man, this kid got it from an early age, and he knew that he was going to have to do that, and he didn't feel entitled, so to speak, or no, you see some of these players, man, that come in and they get those big ones right out of their entry level. And I imagine for younger kids, they're like, oh, well, that could be me. It didn't seem like he had that attitude. And I think that must be a great example for younger kids trying to make their way now as well.
Well, I think it shows you where the kid was never complacent. He's very hungry. He's highly motivated to become the best player he possibly can be. Yeah, sure. We easily probably could have done a 6 or 7 year deal coming out of his entry level, but at that time, you're not 100% sure what a 20, 21-year-old's upside can be off of his previous years. We knew Jesper had a chance to be a good player. We didn't know how good he could be, but we did know that he needed to do A, B, and C, and D to get to that level. And this wasn't, hey, prove it to me, because if he signed a deal back then, things would never change. Like the path would have never changed. Like his ice time, like I said, his motivation, his work ethic, that just doesn't change. But you don't come to an agreement on a long-term deal. He decided to do a 2 year deal. We actually wanted 3. And that 2 years, the first year, man, I felt like the first year went like that because it was that season that started in January. He wasn't even over here yet because of immigration. I think he just barely made our first game of that year. And that was a short year. So now you're going right into year 2, which was a couple years ago. And, he parlayed it, another good year. And that brought us to last year. He was one of the guys that I mentioned about going to arbitration.
Yeah.
You go to arbitration. That was his right. And we sat in Toronto, and at the last minute, we talked about a 1 year deal, but with the intentions of tying this young man up long term.
Yeah. Let me arbitration Fitz just in general. I know over the years, sometimes players come away from that, and I don't know if hurt's too strong word, but just maybe surprised at some of the honesty, the bluntness that they do hear in that. How much have you noticed over the years that players are now starting to just understand that's part of the process and you can't take it personal, and they take it and they utilize it to improve?
Well, you can't. You have to have thick skin in this game. Whether it's just whether you're a trainer or equipment manager.
A reporter.
When things don't go right for a player, it's a high intense area, that locker room. So you have to really have thick skin. The other thing too is the PA does a lot of the contracts, if not all ARB cases. They prep for every player's ARB case, and every team uses league counsel to do this. So you kind of almost sit on the sidelines,
Okay.
and you just may give information. But yeah, like I said, you got to have thick skin. I don't like the process personally because it can get a little tumultuous, and but it's never personal. But I will say, like, we literally sat on the sides until we negotiated with the agent at the
Okay.
last minute. League lawyers, PA, they didn't get involved there. Once you walk into that room, we're back on the sidelines.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just think back, man. I don't know if you remember, showing my age here. Was it Harry Sinden? Was it? I think it was Joe Juno or something. And they were in arbitration. And he had that famous line where he said, "Well, if he doesn't like it, he can go yodel over in Switzerland."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
And again, I don't know
imagine
what
it's
happened.
kind of toned down a bit since then.
For sure. Hey, listen, it's a tool for the players, and the PA does a really good job of, you know, showing us the comps. I don't want to say guiding players to sign certain type of deals, but they work hand in hand with the
Yeah,
PA registered agents.
right.
So, um, but hey, listen, more part that's what we do for a living, right?
For sure. Hey, getting back to what you were saying, just watching these young kids develop. When you came in, or even back to when you were still interim GM, assistant GM, and you're kind of looking ahead to the future, were there players that you recall then that sort of popped and you said, I really think these guys are going to be, integral components to my team down the line, and now you see where they are. What is, if you could just give one as an example, and just the progress you've seen since then, and how refreshing it must be to see that sort of develop.
Well, you know what? If we go back to January 12th, the day I was surprised of what was happening with my mentor Ray Shiro, and then the question that was asked to me, and I had to do a lot of soul searching and thinking about it. Um, if I
Yeah,
didn't if I didn't accept it, they had somebody else that would have accepted. So I figured for the rest of the staff, can we keep some continuity here, um, and see where this thing goes, right? So, but, but I would say later on that month, I was prepping because ownership wanted to see what my plan was, and
right.
how would we put this in motion. And you know what, I was lucky because it's easy to identify. We called them the pillars.
Right.
Jack Hughes was in the middle of his 18-year-old year. Nico was just coming out of his entry level.
Mhm.
Jesper Bratt was in that first year of that bridge deal. But I identified those three in particular as pillar players, and how we were going to build around with support players, character players, but also build through the draft to try to add to the core or pillars with high the Dawson Mercers. We think Alexander Holtz will be a pillar. And then even further down the line, knowing that we really were looking to get future assets, with some of the veterans that we identified to move on from.
Right.
And those players turned out to be, whether it was
Mm-mm. I think we lost Fitz there for a sec. We'll get back to.
happened, Murph.
Oh, we're there. We got you. That's
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not sure. I got back on Wi-Fi for whatever reason. If it happens again, I'm going in the house.
It's the gremlins.
Yeah.
No worries. But yeah, back to what you're saying. Don't just no worries. We'll keep going. You're just talking about identifying those players, and then when they actually start to pop.
Yeah. And that was really the start of we called it the blueprint of where we
Hmm.
wanted to go. Identify the pillars, um, and then how we're going to build around them with the current group that we had. Who stays? Basically, we've identified guys that would probably have to move on from, um, and then going out and identifying players that can come in and surround our core with winning habits, pedigree. And then I'll continue to build through the draft and player development. And I think we've done my team has done a pretty good job of checking the box on the things we said we were going to do.
Right.
And sticking to a game plan. And I think that's why, we're seeing, again, some success on paper, some buzz in the air. Obviously, the game's played on the ice, but we really feel like we did what we said we were going to do.
Yeah. And great segue there. You're at a point now. Obviously, you got that buzz going. There's a lot of hype around you. I mean, I don't know if you expected it this fast, but you've got people like me in the media predicting you guys to make the finals. And uh, how do you just mentioned staying the course? How do not only you stay the course now, but also keep the players staying the course and kind of blocking that out?
Well, great question. Again, going back to my blueprint, we went through each year. So 2021, well, it would have been just 21. Where were expectations? We called it the learn the win phase. Understanding what it takes to winning hockey. Understanding time management on the clock. Understanding
Hmm.
when blocking shots, getting pucks out at the blue, getting pucks in. We just called it the learn how to win phase. And that was years 1 and 2, which really, if you look at what we've done, and I said on paper, it came to this year, if we don't get to the second round, it's a disappointment. And then we're in
Right.
our winning, winning cup phase.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at right now. So, sure, I think the biggest question going into this training camp is I don't think I have to worry about motivating our players or our coaching staff. We're very, very hungry. Everybody knows expectations and standards have been raised, and that's why we play the game. But we also know that we are a good team. We will have some ups and downs, but we're a more mature team, and that's all. That's how winning teams get started. If you look, in the past, that even the Tampas or Colorado or Chicago's, they were
Yeah.
young teams that matured and learned through the ups and downs of playoff hockey. There's a lot that this team reminds me of the teams that I was in Pittsburgh with, because
Hmm.
of the young core. But you have to go through it. You have to understand it. And at the end of the day, winning 4 rounds of hockey is the hardest thing in any sport.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
these guys have an idea, but there's still another step or two to get to where we want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, Fitz. I remember obviously covered the Bruins for a while, and um, after the series in 2010, when they blew that lead to Philly, 3-0 series lead, 3-0 Game 7 lead, you're looking at, okay, they're going to blow this up, but they didn't. And I remember talking to Chiarelli at the time, talking to Mark Recchi, and say, no, this is exactly what we needed, what the younger guys needed was a crushing defeat like this, or a taste of the playoff heartbreak, so to speak.
Mm.
And now you can take that and move forward with it. And of course, the next year they go on to win a cup. And I look at it that, I remember doing a story on that. And then I got thinking about it. I bet if you go back to so many different Stanley Cup winners, each Stanley Cup winner probably had a prior experience like that. You don't just get there. You have to have that setback and taste, what it's like in that handshake line, thinking you were going to go further and you're not. And these guys now are moving on. I always found that as a valuable lesson just to cover the sport as well. And I imagine it does for people too. I mean, for players too.
Sorry, Murph. I've been,
That's okay.
yeah, I gotta move.
That's okay. No worries.
You were Charlie Brown and me there. You and I kind of work. Charlie Brown's teacher. I'm just gonna head into my
No worries. Get in there.
work. Actually, a lot cooler. Anyways, so we were just refresh me on what you were
So
just going
basically,
through.
I'm talking about, one thing I learned was a reporter just covering the game and learning what it must be like for players to get to the pinnacle and to win the Stanley Cup. They always have to taste that defeat in the playoffs and that heartbreak. And I look back at that Bruins team that lost to Philly, blew that lead, and then the next year they use that as motivation. They go out and win the cup. And then I went back and I've continued to do it since, looking at the Stanley Cup winners and seeing the path they took. And they all seem to have that identifiable moment that taught them that lesson they needed to know to get it to the next level, to reach the end goal. And I don't know if that, Carolina series last year is going to be your team's moment. Maybe they're going to need more. But do you convey that as a staff to the players?
No, we don't. You know why? And you just brought it up, and you brought a name up that kind of went to you and said, "No, this is okay. We're going to learn from Mark Recchi."
Right.
Um, what a great leader he was for that Bruins team,
Yeah.
and the Andre Palats, the Tyler Toffoli's, these guys who have won.
Hmm.
That's their responsibility
Wow.
to allow to make sure everybody understands process, and you got to go through tough times to get to where you want to go. We can say it as a management group or a coaching group, but then you gotta it's really up to the players and how they experience it and what they take out of it and how
Okay.
they move forward and what are the gains they get from that. So um and like I said, I know how hungry our players are, and I know that they know there's a long way to go. But realize like we are a good team. Complacency won't set in, and we'll push each other every single day to get better.
Yeah. Looking at your team right now, Fitz, at the roster, is there one area or weakness that you identify that has been consistent, over the last couple of years, or do you feel it's shifted, or what's the big area for you that you would like to shore up as the season goes on,
Well, I
whether
think if
that's
you look,
internally or externally too?
yeah, no, I think if you look back a couple of years ago, when you look back to 2020 and then heading into the 21 season, and in particular going into the 21-22 season, um, I really thought we could be bigger and more mobile on the back end, and we did that. We went out and acquired, Siegenthaler, went out and got Graves before the expansion draft. We signed Dougie Hamilton. So right there, you've got three big mobile guys. Plus, we had a couple kids. We had Damon Severson still. Ty Smith was coming, wasn't quite ready. Um, we moved by a couple of veterans, but we knew we had a kid like Kevin Ball coming,
Mhm.
a Kachuk coming. Where we're at now, when we lose two veterans like Graves and Severson, sure, they're hard to replace because of experience, but we wholeheartedly believe, and I do, Kevin Ball can come in and you know give us really strong, hard defensive type minutes that Ryan Graves gave us. And we think Luke Hughes can give us the offense that Damon Severson gave it. These guys are they're not even near the top of their games. They're not even scratching the surface,
Right.
and that's what we like. So will they make mistakes? Yeah, for sure. But I think we have enough veterans around those two in particular players on the back end to really support them. And I'm a big believer in, the only way you're going to get better is by making mistakes and learning
Yeah.
from them. And then I'd say, a couple years ago, we decided, it's tough when you have seven goalies. It's not fair. You go through seven goalies. We bring in Vitek Vanacek, and he had a great year for us last year. And we did believe in Schmid, but thought he may need some more time. And you know what? He's going to get a chance to run with Vitek at the start of the year and see where that goes.
Right.
It's the most volatile position, like you just don't know what you're going to get. You
Look at
can think
Vegas.
well, yeah, it's a great example. I mean, the reality is there's what, three or four, maybe five elite goalies out there, and
Mm.
you can argue to say none of them made it to the conference finals and beyond last year.
Yeah.
So it's not an answer. We're all about team defense. Let's not give up high quality chances because we don't care who's in there. Jerry Cheevers could play for us, and he's gonna he's gonna give up a lot of goals. So if you're giving up high scoring chances, so to me, it's
Yeah.
about everybody in front of our goalie.
Were you, speaking of goalies, were you surprised overall? Just, I remember going into the draft this year, and then even, in the week transitioning into free agency. There's a lot of hype around the NHL goalie market and how many goalies might be moved on the trade market. And it didn't really pan out that way. Were you surprised at the way it panned out?
No, no, not at all.
Okay.
Again, I think I'll say it like it's the most volatile position there is. It's the most important position, but the volatility in it is high.
Mm.
From one year to the next. For us personally, we were looking. We felt we felt the data and the analysis that we were getting back from the season before were all positive and going in the right direction. All we said was we need to, if we can just get average goaltending, we have a
Mhm.
chance to be a playoff team. You know, and we got better than average, and
Yeah.
you know, we had 112 points. I don't know what that means moving forward, but you know, we got what we went out and looked for. You know, what we were looking for, we found it.
Right.
It's a coin flip this year. I believe our goalies are going to be good again.
Yeah.
You just
I
don't
hear
know.
you. Yeah, that's it. And you're not the only one in that situation.
Mhm.
Before we go, you referenced it earlier there, Fitz. You said Ray Shero, my mentor, and I just wanted to talk about him and what he's meant to you and how much you've applied that you learned from him over the years.
Well, you know, of course he is. He's the one who brought me into, you know, management after my playing days with Boston back in '07, and we've gone some, you know, we've grown together. You know, you look at the '07, '08 year, we lose the Cup Finals.
Mhm.
'08, '09, he asked me to come behind the bench. We win a cup in '09. Um, and you know, me personally thinking, geez, I played 18 years, 17 years, and I only been to the Cup final once. I've been doing this for 2 straight years, and we're in the Cup. Um, but then you have some hard times. You know, you got
Yep.
expectations that are high, and you. But anyways, we've grown a lot together. He's really helped me in a lot of areas. We are different, but similar in some areas. I think the biggest area that I've learned from him, and it took some time, is just the amount of patience he has with making a deal and analyzing that deal. And making sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted on certain things. And I like to think I took that from him when we finally say, okay, let's do this deal. It isn't just a knee jerk reaction. Ray was never like that, and I don't think I'm like that at all.
Did that patience play a role in the Timo Meyer trade? Because it seemed, there was a lot of talk for a while, but it took its own life form and materialized the way I would imagine you were taught it should.
Yeah, and I see people, my team around me, get a little antsy, that maybe decisions aren't made a little quicker. But I remember being in those guys' shoes, watching Ray do it. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, he got Marion Hossa, right? You
Yeah.
know, he got Hal Gill when we won the cups those years. He waited, he was patient, and I saw it trickle into New Jersey as well. And I realized, you know, sometimes just being a little more patient, you get the most out of a deal. Uh, but yeah, I would say that was for sure, having some patience there. We had the assets, you know, we had the assets that probably other teams didn't, and we knew it. But I think it worked out great for both teams.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, Fitz, always a pleasure, my friend, and I look forward to seeing you around the rinks and get in some last free time there if you can.
I will.
All
Thanks,
right,
Murph.
Tommy Fitzgerald joining us here on Murphy's Hockey Law. I'll talk to you next week.